Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Expats in Ukraine with your host, me, Corey. Today, my guest, he is Coach Scott Fox from the US. He is a coach, like I said, and also a humanitarian. Coach Scott Fox, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, Corey. Thanks so much for having me here.
No, it's great having you. We've been following each other on Instagram for a while,
Yeah.
and I've seen what you're doing and how passionate you are about, doing this in Ukraine, your work in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So I wanted to invite you on the channel just because I'd love to chat with you, man.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate that. Yeah, I love being here. This is my second trip to Ukraine, and yeah, you're right. You got it, man. I am a coach, and we'll call it humanitarian work. Yeah,
Yeah, you're doing a lot of good work, and I've seen that you're working with kids recently as well.
yeah,
We'll get to that in just a second, but I want to ask you like the main question, like why are you in Ukraine? What are you doing right now?
yeah.
Why are you
Well,
here?
I tell people there's multiple answers for that. I'll give you the earthly answer
Mhm.
first. I think that society, whether it's Ukraine or the United States, but let's keep it at Ukraine right now, definitely needs new solutions for, we'll call it mental health in general. The war, of course, has created a massive amounts of stress in people, and you know, I'll tell you the backstory on all this. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Alexandria, Virginia, and the full-scale invasion hit. I saw that rare big headline in the Washington Post. You know that when they have the big block
Mhm.
that says invasion, and I just started to feel emotional about it, and I don't really know why, other than it was in my heart, and there's tragedy all over the world. There's tragedy in my city. Washington, D.C. is,
Mhm.
a stone's throw away. There's all sorts of stuff going on. I felt a special pull for Ukraine, which was odd. Um, and so a few days later, there was an article in the Post again where they were interviewing a U.S. veteran, military veteran, who had come over to fight alongside the Ukrainians. And the interviewer said, basically, that's kind of crazy. Why are you doing that? And his answer really got me in my heart, which was, I'm trained for this. It would be crazy for me not to do this.
Mhm.
So I thought, wow, I'm trained for stuff too. I work typically with athletes who are trying to be their best and generally overcome mental and emotional blocks. And those tools are wonderful for relieving stress and anxiety, resolving trauma. And I thought I can do that for Ukrainians. So that's the backstory on that. And, I wanted to come here from day one, but I just didn't have it in me yet, and I was being more conservative. I wanted to build up my network of people that I could rely on when I got to Ukraine. So that's what I did. I networked for a couple of years, and I ended up really just calling one friend in Europe and saying, hey, I want to help Ukrainians. Who can I call? And that person put me in touch with somebody. They weren't quite right, but I kept going. And eventually I landed with a group out of the UK who were people similarly impassioned and trained as I was. And these are all unlicensed practitioners of techniques that really help people. These are not licensed psychologists. And we'll get to that in a moment. It's really important for Ukraine. And so I'm over here sharing best practices, essentially, building relationships with a larger vision that we can talk about in there. But that's it in a nutshell. Yeah.
I No, great. It's great to have you here. And one thing I want to ask you, how is Ukraine different than the media portrays? Because you said you were watching,
Yeah.
the build up, you're watching on TV or reading articles about what's going on in Ukraine, and
Yeah.
then you come to Ukraine.
Yeah,
Like,
man.
what is the difference here that you noticed?
The difference is getting to know the people.
Mhm.
You know, I'm smiling because I love the people and everybody that I meet here who I have engaged with in a real way. And I think that's a key too, is that we've got decision makers in the United States they don't have relationships with people. And I think it's really a mistake not to. So I think one of the differences is that Ukrainians, they're like Americans in so many ways. In fact, I put this out here, no offense to my American friends in my country, is that the Ukrainians sometimes are displaying qualities that are more traditionally American qualities that Americans are exhibiting these days. So it's almost like, I'm old enough to remember the early 70s and even 60s, oof, is that it's a friendly lot and there's a sweetness about them, which is really interesting given the ferocity in the battlefield. What I see in the streets is amazing. And I've been just to a few cities. I've been to mostly Kyiv
Mm.
and Chernihiv and Lviv recently. And especially amongst the young people, but not exclusively. You can see them in the streets at night. Someone's got a guitar.
Mhm.
They're just gathering impromptu. They're singing together and they lock arms and they sway and they don't know each other, but they know each other. And I
Yeah.
think that's an amazing sign of a culture that um, has preserved something from the past. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine has a really strong sense of community. The U.S. It feels like it's a very divided. It's
Mhm.
a very polarizing culture these
Yeah.
days, and there's like a lot of hate going on in the U.S. Left versus right, rich versus poor. I don't know. It's hard to see, what is becoming of my country. I mean, you were there recently. You understand like the politics on it, and a lot of it is affecting Ukraine right now. How do you feel about the current like government in the U.S. before we talk about what you're doing in
Yeah.
Ukraine? Since
Yeah.
we're talking about this, I'm just
Yeah.
very curious because you've been there. I haven't been there in like 3 or 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. And you're from LA,
not from
right?
LA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm from the
exactly.
other side. I'm from, 3,000 miles away. I'm from DC.
Yeah, near
Yeah.
DC, especially
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
politics.
Northern
Yeah.
Virginia. Right. So, my answer would be I try not to think about it, but the reality is because I'm not built that way. But the
Mhm.
reality is, when you live in Northern Virginia, as I do, and I grew up there, your local news is the national or international news. So, you have
Mhm.
to have some exposure to it. And yeah, I'm disappointed in what's happening with regards to Ukraine
Yeah.
amongst the political leaders right now. And, I think that the media coverage as well. And again, I try not to watch mainstream media. It's just not how I'm built. Um, I don't believe, from what I've seen, though, that they have accurately covered the essence of what Ukraine is and Ukrainian culture. I think, I'm gonna put this out there. I think that the name Ukraine is actually very difficult for the American ears to hear. It's just a word that sounds odd. I don't know what you think about that. You've been here. It sounds normal,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's like Uganda, Ukraine. Eh,
Mhm.
it kind of makes Americans be like, what is that?
Yeah, yeah.
And when you get here, it's like, oh, these people could easily be Americans. And that's what I keep telling people is that, and let's face it, a lot of them are.
Yeah.
In Canada and certain parts of the United States, we have large Ukrainian populations in North America. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. We can dive a little deeper.
Oh no, I just feel like the American politicians are just feeding
Yeah.
Ukraine to the dogs. They're how can you shake hands? How can you create a peace agreement with someone that is actively trying to, kill an entire nation, subjugate an entire nation like Russia is?
Yeah.
It's really
I don't know. I don't know. It's a funny thing. And that's such a, lighthearted word. I don't understand.
Mhm.
Um, I am been around the sun long enough, a few times to remember different approaches, and I don't recognize this approach at all.
Mhm.
I see it in history, and I just saw one of the great Winston Churchill quotes, something about along the lines of, you've got a choice. I'm paraphrasing, and you can choose honor or not.
Mhm.
And this doesn't feel overtly honorable
Mhm.
to not support Ukraine fully. Yeah,
Yeah. One of my favorite Churchill quotes is, "You can always trust Americans do the right thing once all other options are exhausted."
right.
You know, I'm hoping that rings true, but unfortunately,
Yeah.
I just feel like I don't know. Americans may not do the right thing in this situation because these
Well,
peace talks are already going on without Ukraine in Saudi Arabia with Lavrov, who's been lying to the media about what's going on in Ukraine for 3 years already, even longer.
mhm.
I don't know. It's sick to see, man.
Well, what I try to also remind myself is to be optimistic about it. And it may be just the way I'm built on this. Um, I think that America also is more than our government. And I think that we have an amazing group of people in the country. Yeah, maybe they're not activated enough right
Mhm.
now on this topic. Maybe they don't understand, how important it can be to them. And unfortunately, it seems like, I'm trying to think, yeah, maybe 9/11 is the last time that we really came together
Mhm.
as a country. And I hate to think that we have to have a disaster on our own shores. Maybe that is, I don't know. I don't want to say that, but
Yeah.
we came together at that moment, and I hope that people can do it again in a way that is honorable.
Yeah, I feel like right now we're in a very pivotal moment in American history as well as world history. We're living through really interesting times right now. Typically that's a bad thing to say, bad thing to go through, but either way, I can sit and talk politics all day with you, but let's talk about Ukraine,
Yeah.
and what you're doing for
Yeah, I
Ukraine.
got no expertise on politics.
Oh yeah, no, you're from DC, haven't been back in the US. I want to get an
Right.
American's perspective on kind of, these peace negotiations, that the US is initiating. So I think I'm done with that for now. I don't know. It just
But I'll stay for 1 second on that because our country is polarized. I mean, half the people like what's going on, maybe, and half
Yeah.
the people don't. And that's really how our society has been for many, many, we'll call it elections. People think it's a landslide if it's 45-55. It's still 50-50.
Yeah.
So, it's a funny thing. And I hope that people will do really what I did, which is believe nothing and come and investigate yourself. And I think that my Ukrainian friends that I've made here, who also have encountered Americans and also Western Europeans, will say the same thing, is that when people come here, they're shocked
Mhm.
at so many things, in that they enjoy it, that the people, they enjoy the food. There's so many things that they can enjoy here. It's a very easy place, I think, for a Westerner to come and enjoy themselves. And I
Yeah.
think that post-war, post-victory, that Ukraine is going to be an amazing tourist haven for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, even before the full scale invasion, it was a beautiful place. A lot of people were coming for tourism. I was traveling across the country, checking out new places, and there's still so many gems here in Ukraine. And unfortunately, the war has put a halt on a lot of tourism, and a lot of these areas are under occupation right now. For example, I used to vacation in Skadovsk, which is in Kherson region, which is it's currently occupied, like the area where Skadovsk is. And there was the largest island in the Black Sea belongs to Ukraine. It's called Zharohach.
Mm.
So 2 summers, each summer, like 2 summers before the full scale invasion, I would go there with my ex girlfriend. We'd get a tent and we'd camp on the island for like a week.
Nice.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
They called it the Maldives of Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
and no, I loved it for it because you do have clear waters, you have like sandy beaches, the island.
Yeah.
It was very nice, and all that is occupied right now.
Yeah.
And people like you, unless something drastic changes and Ukraine gets that land back, people like you will probably never be able
Right.
to like witness that or see that.
Exactly.
And it's very unfortunate, man.
It is. It is. So
But anyways, let's talk about the work you're doing in Ukraine. So you come to Ukraine and you're making connections, and I see that you're doing a lot of work in Western Ukraine, and I even saw some videos of you working with stress management, in schools,
yeah,
for children. And all
yeah,
this. Talk
yeah.
about this for a sec.
Yeah. So look, there's a crisis, of course, in Ukraine with regards to mental health. They need psychological support, as they call it here. There's a crisis in the United States too, and basically the demands, the demand of a society has outstripped the supply of people who can address it in the typical way, which is, you go to see a psychologist.
Mm.
And that doesn't work anymore in the United States. And it certainly doesn't work in Ukraine as a sole solution. So just let me give you some scope here, or metrics. In the United States, we have 46 psychologists and psychiatrists per 100,000 people. And it's been widely stated that that's not enough. And even in the United States, 1/3 of all of the counties in the United States of America,
Mhm.
wealthy place, 1/3 of the counties don't even have one licensed psychologist.
Mhm.
So we got ourselves our own crisis there. When I get up on stage, like at the American Baseball Coaches Association, I spoke in January. I tell people, like, if you think that your institution is going to solve this problem for you, Mr. and Mrs. Coaches out there, think again. They don't have the resources either, and they know they don't. So it's up to, let's stick with Ukraine for a moment here. The number in Ukraine is 1 per 100,000 people, and there's a war going on. So there's no way in the world that traditional methods of addressing emotional and psychological needs is going to be met. And so what we need to have is what's been stated. I live in Virginia, so the head of clinical psychology in the University of Virginia says that the future of mental health care is people like me. These are unlicensed people learning high efficacy, fancy word for it works, techniques and they can go out into the communities and deliver it wherever. It could be at the drugstore, at the barbershop, at the church, and at the ball fields, which is where I go.
Mhm.
And here in Ukraine, same thing. So I'm teaching anybody that I can these techniques. I'm aligning with certain nonprofits who have access to lots of people. It's kind of a train the trainers approach, but also work directly with children. Have had a chance to work directly with some veterans and some women's groups, and we'll continue that.
Okay. And what are some examples of the methods that you use?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
curious.
So I use multiple methods, but the one that I lead with in Ukraine is emotional freedom techniques, or EFT. I've been using that for about 16 years. I had criteria. I was looking for stuff that would help me be the best ball coach I could be. And my backstory is I played college baseball at Brown University. I was physically talented enough to become a professional, I'll say. In baseball, we talk about having 5 tools. I think once in a while, I had 5 tools. And what I didn't have, though, was the non-physical skills, the mental and emotional consistency to play consistently. So scouts would look at me and they'd say some good things about Fox, and they'd come back and they'd be like, oh no, because I just wasn't consistent enough.
Yeah.
So I knew, roll the clock forward, that that's something that other ball players could benefit from. And when my daughter was getting to the age of wanting to play sports, she wanted to play baseball with the boys. And I was like, great, I'll be a coach. And I dove in at that point to try to understand what I could bring to the table to try to help these kids. And I lost track of your question.
Oh no, I was talking about what methods you use.
Yeah, the methods. So,
Yeah.
so the criteria I wanted was something that did not involve machinery. So, like, neurofeedback is a wonderful thing. You get some electrodes strapped on your head, and you sit there, and the computer will help retrain your brain. Not practical though for ball coach on the field. So I got to EFT because it doesn't require any machinery, and best, it has been clinically studied. It's got over 120, probably 140 peer-reviewed journal entries at this point. Those are people with PhDs and credentials I don't have who have studied it and almost universally say, wow, this is really good. In fact, it's producing the same results as the traditional psychology gold standard, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, except it does it much faster. And that's important. We got millions of people in both countries, but in Ukraine, who need help. We got to do this rapidly, because the longer, it's like that analogy of a ship coming out of port. They're 2 degrees off course. That's easy to correct if you catch it right away. Catch it in, a few months, it's 1,000 miles off course. And so it's important to use these techniques. And EFT is really simple. It's been clinically studied. Even the American, the VA system, taking care of veterans, they've approved the use of it for the treatment of veterans with PTSD. Now, PTSD is a tricky thing to resolve. Just one more stat on that is that there is a pro bono project been going on for about 20 years called the Veterans Stress Project. And that's an EFT-based project that anybody with PTSD from the military comes in there. After about, I think it's 26,000 veterans who've gone through it. That's a lot. They found that within 6 45-minute sessions, 86% of the veterans fall out of the spectrum. That's an enormous success rate. Traditional methods, which is pharmaceuticals and talk therapy, they don't always work, period. And you've got literally Vietnam vets still walking around who did everything that the VA hospital system told them to do, and they still have PTSD. They come through here and they get success. And so with that kind of success and ease of implementation, I'm out here being a big advocate of it.
Okay. And how long have you been doing this in Ukraine?
So I started online in 22. I think it was probably maybe about 3 or 4 months, about 3 months after full-scale invasion started. And then in person, came out here in September of last year.
Okay. And is there like some positive feedback that you received that they told you maybe it changed their they changed their life, it changed their mental states. Can
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. Yeah. So from a anecdotal standpoint here, hmm yeah. So in Chernihiv, I work with a program called the Children of Chernihiv. It's
Mhm.
just great, and it's a combination of a church-based school and also public school. And so the teacher goes between both of those.
Mhm.
And one time she told me, she's like, Scott, the other teachers in the school are looking at me like, why are you so happy? You know, they're all glum and stressed out. And she says, I have something called EFT, which was great. And, you know, I can see it in the kids as well. They're not going to articulate, you know, how it changes them. But I've been trained in this enough, and I've done this with so many people that I can see that when I'm on a Zoom call with these kids, and that's generally how we've been implementing, and their body posture, you know, if they're sitting up, and by the way, it looks like this, it's tapping on spots. We'll talk more about that.
Mhm.
And then I see them do this. It's because their parasympathetic nervous system kicked in.
Mhm.
The cortisol dropped in them, the stress hormones. And it's as simple as that, is that if we can get people out of this fight or flight that's perpetual so they can sleep, boom, success. Um, I'll tell you another story with regards to that is I was with a group that I'm not going to use their name because I don't have permission to talk about my clients, but I was with a group of veterans and we're in a rehab setting, about a dozen of them. And I'm taking them through this process. It's very simple. It's all mechanical. We're not diving deep. There is an opportunity to dive deep with this technique, but just very surface teaching them. About three of them start to head bob. They're about to fall asleep. And I've seen this before, and I'm not insulted. I like it when people want to fall asleep when I'm in the room doing this, because again, it means that their nervous system is getting a boost of chemicals that is going to let them rest and digest, as we say, get them out of that fight or flight. And this is a huge theme. I know you live here, you know it. Ukrainians are not sleeping. They're not sleeping enough.
Yeah.
You know, any of my American friends who are out there who don't quite get it. I mean, let me just say what we do. I turn off the alert, you know, because we have to live. If you let that alert on your app go off all the time, you can't sleep at all. And that's a huge thing. So I know this technique is helping people, and we're just at the beginning of it. You know, in order to really have the sea change that I think society needs in both countries, it's going to be it's a marathon. It's a long play. I'm
Yeah.
not over here just to have, you know, one meeting in and out. Um, I just got a really nice email from one of the really good nonprofits or NGOs that I just presented to, and their psychology staff came in. We did a training, just about a 2-hour training, and they got it. The email said basically, hey, we want to work with you on this. We think this really has a place in our practice, or excuse me, in our mission. Come in, let's develop some protocols, let's develop a program, let's go raise some money and go, which is like, wow, that's awesome. And I want to have more of that.
Yeah, this is, very non-traditional, right?
Yeah.
So how receptive are the Ukrainian people of this?
Yeah, that's a great question
Yeah.
because I was told ahead of time, oh, there, you know, lots of reasons not to do this, Scott. First off, it's a very religious country, and sometimes, you know, we'll just put it in terms. I'm not saying just Ukraine, in the United States too. A fundamentalist perspective could be, oh, this is not something we should be doing here. This looks weird. We're touching our body in a certain way. So there was that stigma. And then there was the veterans. I was told by Ukrainians as well as Americans, the Ukrainian veterans will never do this. It's not macho. It's not going to fit into their, psychology or their social preferences. Remember, Scott, that, the Soviets crushed everything that was not, anything that was kind of spiritual.
Mhm.
And this is psychology was lumped in with that. They're not going to do. And it turned out to be exactly wrong. And I think that part of it is that the Ukrainians are a lot like my athlete clients in that they they're open to things because they're pressured, and we'll even say sometimes desperate. You get an athlete who's on a scholarship and they're not playing well, they're like, oh, I'm going to lose my scholarship.
Mhm.
or I'm not going to make it to the pros, or whatever fear comes up. And they've tried their traditional approach. All of them have a sports psychologist in their schools, either that didn't work for them, or they didn't like it, or they didn't go to it because they just don't want to go to a psychologist. And Ukrainians may have had their moments in the past where, yeah, psychology and emotional stuff, that's just not part of our society. I'm finding that they're open to it now, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and you're just one person. I'm sure you have like several teammates doing this with you, right? Or
Yeah, so I do have teammates. I'm the only one that's come to Ukraine, and
okay,
so I've got three other teammates. One of them is in the Netherlands, one is in New York City, and one's in Kryvyi, and she's our translator.
okay,
And so every other Friday, we have a free Zoom call for any Ukrainian that wants to experience some anxiety relief. We just describe it as that. We can't go real deep with it because it's a group call and we have, limited time. We keep total time to about an hour. We do some community sharing. People can talk about what's going on in their lives, and then we take them through this process. And that takes for roughly about 25 minutes of this EFT process.
yeah. So my question would be, since it's such a small team,
Mhm.
and you and the translator are just basically the only boots on the ground here in Ukraine.
Yeah.
How do you plan, or do you plan to scale up?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
And
great
how do
question.
you plan? Yeah.
Yeah. So the scale up comes with multiple prongs to it. The big vision here is that I want to create a sea change in both countries, which is to say, educate the public mm, through, we'll call it experiential learning, get influential people within society, and I've identified 5 points of contact on that to become advocates. And I tell people in the United States, it's like the day, LeBron James goes to the free throw line and does some tapping and then takes a shot. Hey, if a kid's like, hey, what's he doing? What's he doing? And so that's the kind of thing is it can be with children, military/veterans, business, performing artists, and we'll call it nonprofit world. I'm missing something else in there. And if we can get those groups to become advocates of this and just keep using it, keep advocating it, keep talking about it, I think it can spread. And we need it in both countries, especially in Ukraine for obvious reasons.
Okay, and you said like it's like a lot of tapping, and
Yeah.
it's stress management. I guess what what exactly is it doing?
Yeah.
And what do they do? I'm
Yeah.
so curious. Like
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
seen
So
videos
that's
of it,
good. You're
but yeah,
almost doing it.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll demonstrate it. It's mechanical for one thing, which I like. So we're tapping on meridian endpoint spots.
Mm.
And these are, yeah, meridians out of the world of acupuncture, but we're not exact like a needle is.
Mhm.
We're basically, getting in the neighborhood of some spots. And it looks like this. Well, there's more spots and they're on the hand as well. Well, what happens is that we're shifting neurochemistry. Why? I don't know. This is how the human body works. People have been, kind of banging on their body in Qigong and other rituals for thousands of years. From a scientific standpoint, it seems that we are creating a piezoelectric signal. So this is a small electric signal that's comes about in the world of, well, if you crush a quartz stone, it actually gives off electricity. It's the same kind of a thing. The electric signal travels through the fascia of the body, which is this network of, we'll call it, they used to think it just supports the body. It holds the muscles together so we can be upright. It's way more than that. It's actually a communication system as well. This electric signal goes through that and it gets to the amygdala, which is a part of our brain that holds memories and emotions. When we engage in we'll call it a negative feeling of fear or anxiety or something like that, we can use this tapping, which is the nickname for EFT, to send that signal and counter condition the brain and the body, meaning instead of having cortisol and the anxiety be the dominant chemical, we can start to create serotonin and GABA and these feel-good hormones and shift the neurochemistry so that we are not perpetually in that fight or flight. Also, And this is the super cool part that I loved when I was doing a lot of work, and I still do work with the athletes. We can figure out if somebody's not playing well, we can get them to feel what it's like to not play well. Basically, use their imagination to recall what it's like to be striking out, at a crucial moment, and reprogram ourselves using this technique. Because generally, any kind of anxiety we're feeling right now is a product of something that happened to us earlier in life. From ages 0 to 5, they say, oh, kids are a sponge. That's really a good analogy. Kids are great at taking information in. What they're not great is context. So we create these weird rules inside of us, and it's normal. It helps us survive. It's called the socialization process. But when you get to be an adult, it gets in the way of having fun and doing great things. So these techniques can both calm in the short run and reprogram stuff to help us do cool things like go to Ukraine.
Yeah. And when you meet somebody that is a little hesitant to this practice, like, what do you tell them? Like, they are kind of apprehensive to actually doing this. What do you tell them? Like, how can you convince them to try it?
Yeah, that's the art in all of this. And honestly, it's the hardest part of this for me, because it depends on who you're talking to as to what you're going to say. For athletes, it's all about performance. And I just say, look, it may look weird, but here's the track record on it. It's been used by XYZ teams quietly, that are people who have not been my clients. And then people who have been my clients, you can go to my testimonial page on my website, and you can see some people make some amazing statements. For people who are more into this for the subjective psychology piece, hey, I just want to feel better. I want to sleep, all of that. I talk about science with them. The science of it is pretty darn good, because it is clinically studied, because you do have a bunch of people with credentials signing off on it. And after 15 years of lobbying by the group that certified me, US Congress approved the use of it in the VA hospital system for the treatment of veterans with PTSD. And so, put that out there, and people who are skeptical, like, okay, maybe, and that's good. Somebody who's a cynic, I can't help. They're just not built for it, and that's their choice.
Yeah. Can you talk about, like, your current mission you're on right now? Because you've been, I think you just came from the West recently, right?
Yeah. I was in the West, and so I worked with a group that I'm going to use their name. I think I'm allowed to do that. Yeah. It's called the Dreamers UA, and Dreamers focuses on the psychological support of women and children. And this happened to be the women's camp, and so I was invited to present EFT to them, and they loved it. They loved it. They were very receptive to it. And women are great in many ways. They're really great with EFT. Now, the process works best when the subject or person can tune into their body and feel the sensation associated with what we'll call a negative emotion. So if you're nervous, where do you feel it? Now, a lot of people feel it in their belly, right? Butterflies in the stomach. Women are really good at that. And so they tune in, they do the tapping process with that. And this always happens. Let's say there was 15 women there. Some of them shared and said, wow, on a scale of 0 to 10, I had a 6 of a feeling in my heart. We went through the process. It's a 1 or a 0 now. That's it. That's how it works. And so it's palpable, and I can talk about it all day long until somebody feels it. They won't understand it. When they feel it, it's like going to a comedy show. We can talk about comedy and what it does, but when you laugh, oh, that was funny. I understand it now. And so that's generally how people get on board.
All right. And you're in Ukraine for the long haul, or like, what's the situation here?
Yeah. So the situation is coming and going.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first trip out here in the fall was for about a month. That was great. I realized within the first week that I need to spend more than a month. So I came back as soon as I can. And so on this trip, I'll be here for about 2.5 months, and I'm already thinking about, my next trip coming back here. So we'll see where this leads.
You touched on it earlier, but what makes Ukraine so special? Because you go back home and you can go to any other part of the world instead of
Yeah.
coming back to Ukraine. Why do you keep coming back? What makes it so special?
There's the mystical pull
Yeah.
of it all. Part of it is definitely, even though my family never, and I mean never, identified as having Ukrainian roots, I have Ukrainian roots, and I find it fascinating because uh, my family did not identify with it. I didn't know anything about it. I literally didn't know that my father's grandparents, so my great grandparents, were from Ukraine until I told him that I was coming the first time.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So, um,
Do you know which part of Ukraine?
yeah. So he revealed that they're from Volyn.
Where?
Volyn.
Volyn. Okay,
Yeah.
like Lutsk area.
Yes.
Like, okay.
Yes. Somewhere around there. I don't exactly know where. And so that's part of the mission too, is to learn more about my family. My grandfather, who I never met, he died when my mother was young. He was from a little village on the east side of Vinnytsia Oblast,
Okay.
almost to the Kyiv Oblast.
Mhm.
And I drove out there on my first trip, and
Wow.
that was a thrill. Yeah, it was about a 2.5 hour drive south of Kyiv,
Mhm.
and I got to see a little village, and I'm still blown away that that's that's where my lineage is from. Yeah.
Do you have any idea what your great grandfather's last name was?
Oh, so great grandfather. Yes. So it's something like Artsib or Artsab.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, this is the travels through Ellis Island where things
Yeah.
get shifted. And so, um, yeah, that would be my grandmother, my father's mother's parents.
Mhm.
Yes. And so my last name is Fox. That's not that side of the,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
family.
of course.
But I guarantee you that, yeah, the original name was not Fox because all of my lineage comes from Eastern Europe. Yeah.
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 Because I know people from villages, and if you have like a last name and you're associated with a certain region, you can tell which village these people are from because
Okay.
they've been there for many
Okay.
generations a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you know the last name, you could probably figure out which village in Vinnytsia Oblast.
Interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know how good the records are when it comes to keeping records and stuff like this, but I'm
Yeah.
sure you can kind of locate it just based on the
Well,
last name.
yeah, there are some people who can help with that research, and I've just now reached out to some people who can hopefully do that because eventually, if you don't have it written down, nobody's going to know anything, and
Yeah.
I'd like to know it for myself, and I've got kids, and they might be interested in someday.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating.
And how does your family feel about you being here? Because you do have kids, and it's
Yeah.
dangerous in Ukraine.
Yeah. I don't think my kids really are worried about it. If they are, if they're not saying anything. I think my parents might be. They're still alive in their 80s, and I think my mom probably is uncomfortable with it. And look, I just tell people that first off, I want to be here, and I don't feel at risk, even though I am. I just don't have that fear in me, and doesn't mean that I might not someday. But right now, I feel called to be here. I feel comfortable. I like serving.
Mhm.
And honestly, I can tell my American friends this, and it's kind of sad, is that I feel safer walking around the streets in Kyiv than in Washington.
Yeah.
That we have a lot of crime in the United States cities right now. I have, I showed friends from Europe around DC, and we saw some guy get, tackled to the ground. And it just happens. And he needed to be tackled to the ground by the police there.
Yeah.
And so for anybody, that was a shock for me here, is that I feel comfortable at night walking around where, let's face it, we have to go underground and these little passageways in the Ukrainian cities. And that's not normal for Americans to do that. And
Yeah.
my radar went off the first time.
It feels a little sketchy, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be doing what?
Yeah.
Perfectly safe. Yeah.
One thing I noticed that is very unusual here in Ukraine is graffiti. if you go on the metro in Kyiv, you'll hardly ever, if at all, see graffiti like
Yeah.
on the metro.
Yeah.
Whereas, I'm from LA, you'll see graffiti everywhere all
Yeah.
over the metro. New York is probably even worse. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I'll even top that. I agree with you. Is I didn't see any trash in the metro, and I looked
No,
around.
yeah.
And it's like there's no trash cans in the metro stations, and there's no trash on the floor.
Yeah.
It's a cultural difference, and I love that about it. Um, one of the other things that I noticed was that they do handwork on this to keep the streets clean.
Yeah.
There's a broom and a rake and a
Yeah.
shovel.
This little like makeshift broom that the
Yes,
babushki have. Yeah.
yes, and I like that. First off, they're keeping it clean. It's really great for society to do that.
Mhm.
Secondly, they don't use a leaf blower, and
Yeah.
it's quieter and it's just nicer. Um, as an aside, in Alexandria, where I spent most of my time for the last 30 years, there's a petition to eliminate leaf blowers,
Mhm.
and people are recognizing that that kind of stuff just doesn't help society.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Oh no, I really love Ukrainian culture. I really
yeah,
love how the Ukrainian people do things. I like how active, Europeans are in general compared to Americans.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's even though they don't quite have the bike culture here yet, they're trying with that. It seems like I agree. There's a lot of walking. From a health perspective, I don't see the obesity that I see in the United States, and that, despite the fact that we're all eating a lot of cream, a lot of smetana.
Yeah. I know a thing or two about Smetana.
Yeah, I love that. I love that post you put out there. I got some 20% today.
Exactly. Yeah, you're a real man.
Yeah.
A real Ukrainian. But yeah, are you optimistic about the Ukraine's future? I mean,
Yeah.
with the war going on, with the negotiations looming, with society in general dealing with the trauma, are you optimistic about Ukraine's future?
I am optimistic by choice. It's certainly easy to look at facts and say, oh, it's going the wrong direction. And it's certainly, yeah, we can look at that little balance sheet point right now and say, oh, this is bad. And yeah, we can say that. I'm optimistic because of the spirit that I see here. The kids, especially, let's face it, they are the next generation. I love we'll call them Gen Z that I see here, the 20 to 25-year-olds. Man, they're just bright, and they
Yeah.
carry themselves in a very mature way. Not all of them,
Yeah.
but most of them that I encounter, I'll have a one-on-one conversation with. Man, these are sharp people.
I mean, you have to grow up fast here.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's it. And it's almost like, again, going back into the United States in the 1950s, hey, you get married at 21, you had a kid at 22, 23, and you're off to the races. Nowadays you're still a kid at 33.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ukraine is a very well educated, they have a
Yeah.
very well educated society.
I'm
In
with
the
you.
US, it seems like, it's really hard to educate everyone because not everyone can afford it. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think that, hey, look, if I wanted to open up a business, I'm looking at Ukraine. It's a low cost of doing business. It's an educated workforce. They speak English if they're young. And yeah, I know you got a problem because you're neighbors, right? And that's the reason that people are not investing in Ukraine right now. But I want to say something. I want to give a plug. I'm not going to use his name. There's an American businessman, maybe you can have him on your show at some point, who is opening up retail stores in Ukraine right now.
Mhm.
Now, he's doing it to make money and to do it for humanitarian reasons, because he realizes that that's really a great way to help somebody, give them a job, put money back into the economy. And he's a forward thinker. He's way out in front on this. When I saw him on LinkedIn, I immediately reached out and we've connected. And I'm actually gonna see him when I get back out to Lviv. But I like the future of Ukraine. I don't think it goes away. Well, I know it won't go away because it's been under attack for 1,000 years. And guess what? The people are still here.
Yep.
Yeah. And the resilience is amazing. There's a lot of great qualities. Again, I'm typical American. I'm not a world traveler, by the way. This is like my grand adventure. And if I can feel comfortable in Ukraine, I don't speak the language well yet. I'm learning my little words here and there. But if I can feel comfortable here, and people are receptive to me and nice to me. By the way, people have been nice to me. That bodes well for the future. I just want to tell one story on that because it's important. I went to Padil and I put the plug in for my favorite bakery cafe, Spelta, and there's only about 20 seats or so in there, very crowded. There were 2 seats left at a little corner on the counter, and I sat down. Immediately, Ukrainian guy sits next to me, and he speaks some English. And he says, "Oh, you're American. What are you doing here?" I tell him, psychological support work, volunteer, etc. And he's like, "Wow, man." He just looks and he says, "Thank you," really sincere. And we start to chat some more. He himself was interesting. He was working on infrastructure, which is of course hugely important right now. And we do our things, and he gives me his list of favorite restaurants, which I appreciated. And then he leaves. I'm a slow eater, so I keep eating, and then I get up to pay my bill, and the server says, "Oh no, your friend already paid your bill."
Oh, wow.
So some stranger paid my bill, and I'll always remember that, and I later talked to some of my other Ukrainian friends about that, and they said, "Yeah, that's actually part of our culture. You'll see that." And sure enough, that was not the only time that somebody really was kind in that way. So I want people in the United States, but all over, to understand that this is a culture that understands personal relationships, and they value it. It is a distinct culture, as they say. It is not some offshoot of other cultures that shall remain nameless. And I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, it's great to have you here. I'm sure the Ukrainian people are very, happy with the work that you're doing. Yeah, I mean, for like randomly. I did some volunteer work, and I came for that reason.
Yeah.
But I stayed not because of that reason. I stayed because of the people.
Yeah,
The people made me want to stay.
that's cool.
But
That's cool.
but yeah, with that being said, we kind of reached our time. So I'll tell you what. Maybe you want to plug your website, or
Thank
maybe some organizations you're working with, give them a shout out, or maybe just plug your social media. Go ahead, you can look into this camera and plug away.
Yeah. So you can reach out to me at my website is championplaybook.com, sports oriented. I'm also on Instagram at coach_Scott_Fox, on LinkedIn also. And yeah, reach out to me. I always say to people, I'm a real person. Just give me a call, or, we'll connect somehow. And the other organizations, I'm respectful of my relationship with them, so I don't generally put them out there. And but I've got relationships with some of the leading ones that are out there, and I'll do a press release or something like that at some point, and we'll honor them because they're doing amazing work. These groups that are supporting the psychologies of and the emotional needs of children and women and veterans, they're doing outstanding work. Yeah.
We're looking forward to the press release, man. But I'll sign off for now. So thank you guys for watching this episode of Expats in Ukraine with your host, me, Corey. If you like this episode, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more episodes like this, subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions about EFT, comment down below, and Scott will look at the comments, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he'll look at the comments. He'll answer all your questions. And if you want to reach out to him, check out that social media channel of his on Instagram at coach_Scott_Fox.
Yes, sir.
On Instagram. Okay, well, thanks for joining me, Scott. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah,
what I like to do at the end is shake the hand of the guest.
Awesome.
So come on up. All right, thanks for coming on, man. Cheers. No, it's a great chat.